On the fast tarmac stages of the Jim Clark Memorial Rally, changeable weather provided a challenge for all the competitors. And while some were lucky, many were not, including series leader Mike Faulkner. A minor moment early on turned into a major disaster later, when a hard landing and a wet road ended his rally the hard way.
60, flat right 1 over crest, jump, 50, flat jump, flat left 2, and flat left 1, 170.
Obviously happy with the change to tarmac, Sean Gallagher produced his best performance of the season and was battling for the lead all rally long.
Flat left, 80, flat 2 left, 100.
But then Gary Jennings launched an all-or-nothing charge on the last couple of stages and grabbed another win, this time by a margin of only 6 seconds from Gallagher. That victory took him back to the top of the championship leaderboard, but second place put Sean Gallagher right behind him, with Faulkner still third. Gary Jennings had cause to celebrate, but he's only got a tiny lead and it's getting tougher every weekend. And now we're on gravel again, back in the forests of Wales. Round 5 is a quick-fire one-day event, 8 stages on the Army firing ranges in the centre of Wales, hardly more than 45 miles of competition. So every one of these stages will be flat out all the way. It may be short, but it won't be easy.
All else aside, the fact that this is a military firing range means that there's no recce for anyone, and the crews all use received notes instead of their own. Gary Jennings was first man away from the start, well aware that this one had to be flat out all the way. Chris Moore was another one who had to win. Pedal to the metal was his only choice. With everyone else breathing down his neck in the points table as well as the stages, Jennings was sweeping the tracks and setting the pace through the first run of 2 stages. And though the first was fine, he struggled on the second, dropping from second spot on the leaderboard to an unaccustomed 5th. This was something he could ill afford, given that Sean Gallagher, just 2 points behind in the title race, had been faster on both stages. And with only 6 more left to run, this was a serious setback for the Jennings title bid. But if Jennings struggled on the second stage, Chris Moore endured disaster on the first. 10 seconds off the pace, 16th on the timesheets, and not even 4th quickest on stage 2 could get him above 10th place overall. But the pace here was so high that everyone was having a morning of mixed fortunes.
Ten seconds, 80, long left flat, 250 down. 4, 3, 2, 1, go. 80, long left flat, 250 down. Left easy and left easy over bump 100. Open square left and turn square right, fresh air 60.
Third quickest on the opening stage, Marco Ramanen was 12th on the next, for an aggregate 8th on the overall leaderboard as they went towards service. Mike Faulkner's reshell of the car he rolled in Scotland was completed incredibly quickly, and as the rally got going, he was his usual steady self, looking at a top 5 placing with no dramas, just what the title doctor ordered. Danny Dunbabin enjoyed the Scottish tarmac, and perhaps that gave him a confidence booster as they went back on the loose. A couple of quick times saw him fourth after 2 stages, just 5 seconds behind the leader. And quickest on the first stage of the day by 1 second, then third quickest on the second, Sean Gallagher was in second place on the overall leaderboard after 2 stages, just 1 second down on the top spot. Rob and Tracy Russell were finding the pace of the front runners hard to match on the opening stages as the championship leaders blazed off at their usual crash or glory speed, trailing clouds of dust over the stages for everyone behind to find their way through. Bang on the pace on the last couple of rounds, Jack Ingleby was one of those who did find his way up the leaderboard again. 7th on stage 1, second quickest on the next, to be third and just 2 seconds behind the leader after that first couple of stages. After finishing third last time out and proving to be very quick on the Scottish tarmac, Jazz Nandra was a little shy of that back on gravel, but the top 10 cars were covered by a 12-second spread, so it was still close and still wide open. Last time we saw Patrick Richard, he was in flames in a Scottish ditch. Now he was on fire in the Welsh stages, but this was a different kind of fire as the Canadian driver turned 4th place after the first stage into a 1-second lead on the next. Richard Sykes was another one who seemed unhappy with the prepared notes as compared to his own and was running down in the 15s after both the opening stages. Not good when we've seen him do better on previous rounds. Like Jazz Nandra, George Philippides was another driver who looked much happier on a sealed surface last time out and seemed to be off the pace again now we were back on the loose stuff, running 18th after the first 2 stages. Gareth McHale had his best run of the year on the Jim Clark, but now he joined a growing list of drivers who were just not able to produce their best on a gravel event with unfamiliar notes. But the changing nature of the event and the challenge that all the drivers face is one of the things that makes this series such a good one. The Ropers were another crew last seen stuck in the Scottish scenery, but now Ben and Simon were going well, 9th after the first 2 stages as they headed towards the first service halt of what was clearly going to be a frantic day. Local knowledge wasn't much help to Andy Pawley, 17th after 2 stages.
1 left, flat, 100. Down to caution, turn long, 5 left, don't cut. Over concrete lip. Into a narrow bridge. And 4 left, flat. 100.
Up to 11th place after those opening 10 miles, Alan Pearson was looking steady as the full field of 25 starters headed to their first service halt back in Appint. From a distance, it looks like a military encampment as the rally crews set up their awnings, ready to deal with whatever problems the crews had encountered. 5th place, but only 7 seconds behind the leader, Gary Jennings wasn't where he wanted to be, and the 6 stages remaining to him hardly added up to 35 miles of competition. Already, an event that promised to be a pressure cooker had turned into a major championship drama.
Yeah, it's been a wee bit unsteady because with no wrecking and just a wee bit nervy, you know, sliding wide where we shouldn't be, but just want to finish this one because it's quite a wee sprint, you know.
Chris Moore knew before the start that he had to deliver a good result today, and he knew after the first 5 miles that it wasn't happening. But he pulled back a lot on the second stage of the morning.
Big spin about 2 mile in. Almost went off the side of the mountainside, stalled the car in a ditch, facing the wrong way. So that's through my concentration totally. I just can't get into the notes. I can't commit to any corners. Eddie's telling me what the corner is, and I'm waiting till I see it before I commit to it, which it's not how you want to drive in a championship like this. So it's going to be a long day.
Danny Dunbarton was looking good in fourth, but he's been there before on gravel rallies, and this time he's got to keep his cool. Which has been Mike Faulkner's forte all through this season. His usual steady pace working well for him everywhere except Scotland, but it looked as if normal service had been restored.
Good, yeah, we're there or thereabouts. With short stages, it's always going to be really close. I think we're a couple of seconds off the pace on the first stage and then right dead on it the second stage, so 2 seconds in it.
Leading the rally by only 1 second, Sean Gallagher was a man under pressure. There were 24 drivers behind him, all wanting to be in front. Six more stages, 35 miles, and Alan Pearson's charge into 5th place on stage 4 turned upside down on the next, and he was back down to 16th place, but still going like our man Richard Nichols.
Local man Andy Pawley was marching steadily up the leaderboard.
Up to 1 left over bump, 60. Caution, brake 1 left into open 5 right. Hairpin left, 40.
Marco Ramanen had a few problems when they went back out, but soon got his head down again and started to show his customary speed on the loose, although he prefers it a little smoother. But he dropped from 8th after service down to 10th on the next stage, then back up to 9th and then 7th.
Care crest into right fast, do not cut, 40. Right fast, do not cut, 40. Long left K, tightens hard. Long right easy, 130.
Someone else making a steady climb was Jazz Nandra, picking up a place on every stage to be in a pleasing 6th place when they came back to Epping after this run of 3 stages and just over 20 miles. One place higher than he'd been after that group of stages, Mike Faulkner's 5th place was bang on target. This was how he always planned his championship campaign, finishing well every time, but mainly finishing and staying out of the dogfight up front. The Jim Clark had put a small blip on that graph, but the drivers are allowed to drop their 2 worst results of the year, so he's still on course for a strong finish. And so too is Jack Ingleby, returning to Epping Service Halt for the 2nd time in 4th place. But this run of 3 stages hadn't done a great deal for Sean Gallagher's cause, and he'd slowly lost time to Jennings on each stage, finally losing his 2nd place on the 3rd of this group of 3 as Jennings stormed it to go 2nd. Just over 8 miles long, Jennings had taken just under 1 second a mile from the rest of the field, turning 3rd place and a 10-second deficit into 2nd place with just 2 seconds separating him from the rally leader, who was no longer Patrick Richard. The Canadian straight-lined a T-junction, damaged a wishbone and dragged his car into service in 10th place. Fastest on stages 3 and 4, Chris Moore had taken the lead and was 2 seconds clear as they went to service, even though his time on stage 5 had been eclipsed by that Jennings charge for the lead that almost came off. Right on the tail of Chris Moore, with 3 stages and 15 miles left on the schedule, Gary Jennings was in a strong championship position now, although Gallagher was just a couple of seconds behind him so he knew that he couldn't afford to relax yet.
No, all I need is the points. There's no way. Second or third's good to me in the championship. You know, that's all I need from now on, is to settle ahead and get the points. The last thing he wants is an unfinished now, so we'll keep it steady.
But he always says that. No one believes him, especially not Sean Gallagher. 2 points behind him in the championship and 2 seconds behind him on the leaderboard.
Just took a wee bit cautious in the last stage there. It was cut up very, very bad. Like, it just wasn't worth the chance, I think, just driving through it, so we just kind of tiptoed through it. But I thought we lost more, but we're only I think we lost 2 seconds in the last one there. So there's 4 seconds between us and first now.
Chris Moore knew that several drivers needed this win to resurrect their championship hopes, and he's one of them.
The first 2 stages this morning were a complete and utter nightmare trying to get used to the notes. We spun on the first one and lost about 11 seconds, I think. And then the next 2 would just seem to go blindingly quick, and we took 11 out of everybody on one of them. So it's so unpredictable. I haven't got a clue what's going to happen from now on.
Jennings launched himself into the next stage, but he was far from being alone in that. The fastest 10 drivers were covered by a 5-second spread, and Jennings was actually tied for time with Marco Ramannon, and they were both 1 second slower than the rally leader and stage winner, Chris Moore. Stage 7 proved to be momentous for half the runners in the top 10, and Danny Dunbowin's excellent drive was interrupted by a massive slide that took him wide into a rock. The car bounced off it and across the road into a ditch, and it took 30 seconds before it was back on the road again, and that left him well behind the leaders. Patrick Richard had turned 10th place into 9th place, but now a fast time on stage 7, while everyone else had problems, helped him up into 5th. At service last time, Marco Ramannon solved an intercom problem which had been bothering him since the start, and now began to drive at his customary pace. With the stages so short, the 2 8-milers, stages 4 and 5, were easily the longest and far lengthier than anything else left on the schedule for the afternoon. The time differences were usually small, so that hiccup on stage 6 that cost Ramannon 5 seconds was a significant occurrence. On the other hand, a determined charge could easily recoup that amount, so it was still heads down and go for it, even with only one short stage of just 4.5 miles left to run after the final service halt of the day. Moore was still the leader, and Ramannon was mixing it with the likes of Gallagher, Ingleby and Faulkner for a podium finish, but not with Jennings. Mike Faulkner's strategy was working for him once again, and he was now steadily homing in on a podium finish as Gary Jennings went swooping off the track and into the trees, returning 30 seconds later to trail a dust cloud that slowed Ramannon as well, giving Faulkner a handy boost that was magnified as both Jaz Nandra and Jack Ingleby had accidents big enough to mean retirement. Still in second place and seemingly unable to make an impression on the leader, Sean Gallagher was in a much better championship position than before. Jennings was 13th with 4 miles remaining, and Gallagher was looking at turning a 2-point deficit into a 20-point series lead. And Chris Moore, who statistically has been on level terms with Gary Jennings in terms of fast stage times and stage finishing positions all season, was now within sight of his second victory of the year. 7 seconds to the good. All he needed was to finish the brief final stage. Fifth place was no bad result for Patrick Richard, though 5th place on the final stage was no real indication of his effort. He was only 4 seconds slower than the fastest man through, and 3rd quickest on the stage netted a useful 4th place overall for Mike Faulkner. He was a mere 3 seconds away from winning the stage, so you know that everyone was still on it right up to that final mile, especially Marco Ramannon, who was quickest on a stage for the first time today as he set the fast time on stage 8 to put himself in 3rd place on that final leaderboard. Intercom fixed and everything as it should be, Ramannon had begun the 4-mile test just 1 second away from a podium finish, and set himself the task of getting on that third step. He began the stage before Mike Faulkner, but only by the 1 minute margin which separates vehicles at the start of each stage. So Faulkner wouldn't know what had happened in those last few miles until he himself had finished. Their times were never going to be very different over 4 miles of gravel unless one or other had a problem. Neither did, but at the end, Ramanen had done enough to snatch the final podium position, boosting himself past Faulkner by a margin of just 2 seconds. And Sean Gallagher had a good go at taking the lead, but he would have needed 2 seconds a mile on Chris Moore in order to achieve that, and it just wasn't on the cards. But second place was a perfect result for Gallagher, just as first place was a perfect result for Moore, who took the final stage steadily, as well he might.
It's been something of a rollercoaster season for the Geordie fireman, who seems to either win or finish nowhere. And the last couple of events have been nowhere, so this makes a nice points and confidence booster for him. The final result we know: Moore, Gallagher, Ramanen and Faulkner. Patrick Rich 5th, finishing ahead of David Wright, and Danny Dunbobin was 7th. Celebrations for Moore at the end of it all, and no wonder. Short and sharp it may have been, but this was one of the toughest events of the season. And that 7th stage rivalled anything we've seen this year as being the toughest single outing.
The way my championship is, I've got to win rallies now, otherwise I'm going to be nowhere, so I give myself a good kick. We came out of service and within 2 stages we took 15 seconds out of everybody. So that won the rally there and then. We led from that point on. We've had a few dramas since then. Throttle sticking open for 4 miles was rather interesting on one stage. And yeah, I think we've driven fairly well this afternoon and we've won by 5 seconds, so I'm well chuffed.
These are the current points, and if you think this is close, just drop every driver's 2 worst scores and you'll see they're even closer together. But for the time being, it's Gallagher at the top of the table, whichever way you cut the cake, and he was unlucky not to be looking even better.
Yeah, we had a busted shock. I think it was in the 3rd last stage, and it was it upset the car with it. I just couldn't get the traction, couldn't keep the car straight. And we lost a lot of time in that stage. I think it was 7 seconds to Gary and Chris, and that's just what really dropped us back. Before that there was 2 seconds in.
Marco Ramanen finished 3rd, and is 3rd in the points. It could all have been different, but in a short rally like this there's no margin for error.
Well, very difficult. In the morning I thought it's just better to back your car to the trailer and go home and you know, don't mess around here, but after all, the result is definitely good.
Take first into right fast, do not cut.
It's all going to be different again next time though. We're back on tarmac in